Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Legion, Season 1, Episode 8, Chapter 8. This is it, folks, the season finale, the one we've all been waiting for, and this episode split me right down the middle, like an axe through a piece of wood, just cut me completely in half. Of two entirely separate minds about this, but I think that's a fitting ending to this very interesting and very weird season. I'll get to the specifics when we get to them, but let's dig through this in chronological order. This episode kicks off with a bit of a flashback, actually a major flashback, and I think a very needed scene here, because we had the interrogator, as he's credited in IMDb, the guy who was interviewing David, show up in the end of the previous episode. And we hadn't seen him since episode 1. Maybe like a couple of flashbacks. We may have seen his face, like just footage we'd already seen, but he's basically been out of the picture this whole time. He shows back up. He's got a goon squad. He's like, well, I'm going to take you out. You better come with me. And to start this episode off, totally humanizing this guy and really grounding us and making us understand what the other side is here, and that it's not a bunch of faceless goons as we've seen up until now, right? Like Division 3 has been this like literally faceless goons. They're all clad in black. Their faces are completely covered. They might as well be robots. Okay, they are not robots. They're people, right? I assume when they take the masks off, that they are actual human persons that go home to actual human families. But the language of cinema has allowed us to distance ourselves from them emotionally because we don't see a face. They're all uniform. They look like cannon fodder mooks. But this guy, the interrogator, we see that he has a family, right? He has a home. He has a long recovery from his encounter with David, from this horrifying burns that he's had, from being really messed up. I mean, I don't know that he was the most handsome dude in the world before, but you know, you look in the mirror and you think to yourself, yeah, that guy's pretty sexy. He ain't thinking that anymore. He looks in the mirror, he sees this messed up mass of burned flesh. You know, it's messing with his home life, with his self-esteem, and running through almost 5 minutes of just showing this guy's recovery and showing what it's like for him really puts you in a different state of mind, because up until now, it's all been mutants all the time. David and the people around him are all people with powers. They're all like, these guys want to get rid of us. They don't understand us. They're trying to keep us down, which is true to a point. But when he comes to them and says, you need to be put in check because you're basically gods and you could wreck us by accident, it really helps that you've seen him actually having dealt with being wrecked, maybe not entirely by accident, but he's got a point here, right? This guy's not completely off base. This power is actually pretty just unprecedented, and the government doesn't get to tell these people what to do unless they decide that they want to be told what to do. It was also, I think, very telling that he requests to be sent after David, and the scene where he goes to the, back to his work placement in Division 3, whatever that happens to be, was a lot of fun, I would say. His sort of speech about, listen, yeah, I'll be behind a desk as long as it's in the field, because I'm going after this guy. You're not going to stop me. I'm more driven than anybody else on your team. You might want to listen to me. I got the drive and the goods to go and get him. That was neat to see him have that determination, but also to think that maybe he's getting a little bit obsessed here, that David has become his white whale, for lack of a better word. Took his leg. Obviously not literally. Ahab was the one who has leg taken, but you get what I'm saying. Took something from him. He wants to go after him and get it back. And yet there is also this affinity for David, the identification with David that he has that is not completely lost either. However, regardless of all of that, it comes to naught. I think there's even more story here, possibly. I don't know exactly how long it takes him to find Summerland, but I can imagine this guy tracking through, there's maybe like a whole nother show you could make about him going through archives and files and, trying to find out where David is, trying to get a division together, this commando unit to go and get David and his pals. He finally does it, and David dispatches them immediately, like just straight off the bat. It's almost, you're just so not feeling bad for him necessarily, but you can just see the air let out of him that this is his big moment, that he's finally caught up with him. He thinks that he might have some superior force, and it turns out David has totally got in touch with his power, and there's just no issue at all anymore. Like, just no threat presented except for the one that's already inside David's head. I do also like the angle of his eye being a camera. Couple thoughts here. First of all, we're another character aligned with the Division 3, that has a messed up eye. And this one's a camera. Obviously, you have to draw some parallels with the eye. You have to ask yourself the question, did he have a camera implanted in his eye as well? Was it voluntary? What's going on there? The second thing that I thought was interesting, and this is going into my crackpot theory that I've had since the beginning, and I still haven't given up on, that there is at least a possibility that this is all happening in some version of a dream world, astral plane projection thing where minds are the thing and not actual physical bodies. We didn't get that reveal, okay, which is one of the things that frustrated me because we didn't get hardly any reveals in this episode. It just kind of went on with its thing. But if you're going to take that theory, the idea of all these guys sitting around in like watching this camera feed as he's wandering through Summerland really reminds me of sort of an alternate version of what I'm, again, in this crackpot theory, David is with all of these other sort of people representing some aspect of his personality, because they're in some level inside of his head. Maybe not literally, all right? But when he sits down and talks to the other mutants, and we have people watching that conversation through the camera in his eye, in my mind, there's like a potential that you've actually got two weird, like multifaceted beings meeting each other and not realizing it. Again, I understand it's crackpot. The show has gone in through its entire run and not confirmed anything that I thought that it might. So who am I to think that that is still the thing? But I still hold on to that. And the other important thing in this particular segment is that David is still wrestling with what and who he is. He says to Sid, listen, the most dangerous thing about schizophrenia is that you might believe that it's not real. If you convince yourself that your delusions of grandeur are not delusions and that you are in fact grandiose and powerful, then you're in a death spiral from a mental health standpoint. And the show doesn't fully address that either. Again, we don't get like David drops a marker here and says, what if I'm crazy? And then just walks away from it. And we don't get like a resolution like, no, he's not crazy, or yes, he is crazy. It just kind of goes on with the status quo with the weirdness that we've already had. I'm okay with that since I know that we're getting another season, but Noah Hawley playing a kind of a dangerous game of chicken here, setting all this cliffhangery stuff up for a show that he did not know was going to get renewed. We'll get to the cliffhanger stuff later, though. We continue on. David debates with the other mutants what needs to be done with the Interrogator. And I think it's really interesting that he's pursuing this agenda of peace, of negotiation. And he makes a really great point. You know, they say, oh, well, he tried to kill us. And he says, listen, if that was the attitude that everybody had, we would never have a war end. All the wars would continue because you could still, well, they killed some of our guys, we killed some of their guys. Both sides can keep saying that over and over and over until everybody's killed each other and nobody's left. And David has matured enough to realize that and says, listen, yeah, they're not great people, but they're still people, and going to war with them will mean other humans will die on their side and our side, and let's try to avoid that. And he goes in and he talks, you know, he wants to talk to him. Before he gets there, we see another scene with Carrie and Kerry. Still on the outs, Kerry, you know, looking out for her boy, make sure that he doesn't touch the eye. Not the eye, I'm sorry, the interrogator. Although, again, new eye. But there's still that loss of closeness there. They're still split apart now in a way, both physically and emotionally. And that's something that I'm disappointed we don't get to see more of, because it really sort of, this is it. This is the last big interaction between them that we get this season. And it kind of feels like there's a lot more to be told from that story of what's going to happen with them. Where do these characters go? What does their relationship develop into? Do they get over this, or does this create some kind of new dynamic for them? Melanie Byrd comes in and also talks to the interrogator. By the way, just on the subject of Melanie Byrd, I mentioned in the last episode, maybe that I thought Oliver remembered her. Apparently not. A real tearjerker, heartstring moments when she talks to him and he says, remind me of somebody. And she says, maybe like your wife. And she's trying to ask him out. And he says, nah, not my wife. Who do you remind me of? And she doesn't push him. You know, she gives him his space, which is super admirable. But at the same time, like, you can tell, man, this is really hitting her hard. And this show does amazing things when it explores relationships. And I don't think that that's as strong of a theme as I would like it to be, but when it is a theme here, it really works. You know, David and Sid is going to come up as a plot point a little bit later in the episode. Carrie and Kerry, obviously, all of these, you know, sort of dynamics of friendship and love and how all that can fall apart and try to get put back together. That's the aspect of this show that I'm really starting to think is the strongest part of this. David goes in after Melanie Byrd, says, hey, let's end the war. I've got terms. And he talks to the interrogator, and the interrogator says, you know, listen, we can't just leave you unchecked. We can't just let anybody. It's like you have to limit power, right? That we have a whole, you know, in America here, we have this whole balance of power thing where the House and the Senate and the presidency and the judicial system and all of this stuff, and then also the freedom of press to sort of counteract even all of those things. All of these structures are set in place so that no one person can have all of the power, all right? As whether or not you like Donald Trump or are worried about Donald Trump, the thing is, he can't go off and do everything he wants to do, even with a majority in the Senate, because you've got all of these great systems in place that he has to bounce into, and, you know, checks and balances. And the mutants don't get checks and balances if they're as powerful as David does, okay? There's just not a possibility. So you're stuck from the interrogator's point of view of either just trusting him to do good and be right, and also all the other mutants that maybe have his power, including Amal Farouk, who really ain't going to do it. And even if we do trust that David is going to do good and be right, the fact that he had Amal Farouk in his head for all that time is like, no, you can't just trust him, because he's not even in control of himself all the time. He will wreck every shop. All of the shops will be wrecked by David if the Shadow King gets control and gets in the driver's seat. And so they have a point. Division 3, as evil and bad guy-ish as they seem, and clearly they employ some people with dubious moral character, they do have a point about David's power and what to do with it. While we're watching that unfold, we get a little interlude with Sid, who flashes over to the white room that David created for her and him in the astral plane and sees Lenny / the Shadow King coming out of the walls, out of the bed, literally, but just like struggling to get out of David's mind. Okay, so David is maybe psychic, and we can argue that that's how he's contacting her. The Shadow King, I mean, not David, but maybe he's using some bandwidth of that power. He's shut out of David's mind and David's consciousness, but he's still able to access some of the abilities, and he's broadcasting on Sid's wavelength, and he essentially, Lenny, he, she, whatever, makes a deal with Sid and says, you're not going to get rid of me by force. And the analogy used was a really good one. She says, you can put all the ingredients in the stew. You can't undo the stew once you've made it. Like, it's all cooked together. The pieces all infuse into each other. I'm a part of David. You're not going to get rid of me without turning his mind into literal soup and essentially killing him. But if I leave of my own free will, then maybe we can talk. And so, and I think that the Shadow King is really feeling the pressure here, because yes, it can kill David, and yes, that is a card that it can play, but it kills itself at the same time. Like, if it kills David, it doesn't have anything to jump into. It's going to fight back. It's going to preserve itself as long as it can. So it's playing this card to Sid saying, listen, know you care about David. If you don't do something to stop them trying to remove me, I will kill him. So ball's in your court, babe. But this is the offer. And it's, they go ahead with the extraction, and it goes like the Shadow King said. The great sequence, by the way, really beautiful montage. Not the best we've seen, by the way. I mean, for the finale, it seems like they could have pulled out a few more stops here. The previous episode had that great black and white, the silent film section, and just a lot of stuff. This is kind of cool, seeing David rewind through his memories, and the Shadow King poofs away and disappears, going all the way back to when he's a baby. But it's just okay. For any other show, it would be outstanding. But for the standards of Legion, this is just like, yeah, this is a good montage. But he gets all the way back, and we see that the Shadow King can't be completely eradicated. There's great cutaways too, also, to just sort of Oliver doing random stuff in some big generator room, playing Scotty to the Summerland's Enterprise. We need more power, Captain, and just like turning switches and sliding around on a cool ladder. But that's all sort of eye candy. Essentially, what everything boils down to is they're not going to get rid of the Shadow King. The Shower King. Yes, Shower King coming to a store near you. Does your shower moldy? No more, thanks to the Shower King. Sorry, had to get that little plug in there. This episode sponsored by the Shower King. So, the Shadow King's fighting back, and Sid knows what she has to do. She runs into, by the way, love the laser setup. It reminded me again of the Raw Shark texts, which I will recommend again. Sid runs in, and this is my favorite part of the episode, because I'm a sucker for Love Conquers All, okay, and sacrifice and all that crap. I ate it up. I ate it up with the spoon. It's a real big spoon, okay? It's not like a regular spoon. It's like one of those like serving spoons that you would just slop stuff onto your plate with. I put the Love Conquers All in there, and I just giant mouthfuls of that stuff all down my gullet. It's the best, okay? I'm sappy to my core, and to see Sid rush in and knowing that she could be permanently damaged or killed by the Shadow King, still sacrificing herself, makes contact, kisses him, And then we get a really cool section where now the Shadow King is in Sid. I don't know exactly how all this works. She's still herself, I think. She didn't swap with David, but the Shadow King jumped. The Shadow King, now being in control of Sid, yanks the glove off. Kerry's coming in to, kick some butt. Girl Kerry doing her thing. And Shadow King touches her, transfers into Kerry. I was really, really hoping that this sequence would end with Shadow King having been done with Carrie and Kerry together. Like somehow that being the key to eradicate the Shadow King, or to trap it, that Carrie and Kerry, merge back together. Just as a reconciliation thing. Although I don't know, the show isn't set up for the emotional reconciliation, so the physical reconciliation wouldn't really hit. But I thought that's what they were leading up to. It's not where it goes. Instead, she just kind of takes everybody out. Autonomy, no contest. Just points, finger guns at Melanie Byrd and shoots her down. I don't know why she doesn't die. Nobody dies here, which is weird. It seems like with all of this power that's being tossed around, somebody should have died, guys. Especially the one puny human guy that got thrown half a football field into a solid wall. And he'd already been 3rd-degree burned over, most of his body. Maybe he wouldn't have survived that. Not a big deal. I mean, it is a comic book show, right? We can accept things in comic books. But we do get the cool Carrie and David fight. I don't watch Dragon Ball Z, but if I watched Dragon Ball Z and I was going to imagine a live action cool Dragon Ball Z that wasn't completely stupid, in my mind, it would kind of look like this. They have different colors. David's got the red, Shadow King and Carrie's got the blue. I do wonder what powers the Shadow King has when he's in someone else. Does he have all of David's powers? Does he have all of his abilities? Because clearly, Carrie can fight as just a physical thing. But she also does the finger gun thing at Melanie Byrd, and then she's charging at David with the blue force field lightning-y thing. I don't know what that means exactly. If does Amal Farouk have his own powers? Did he steal some of David's powers? Is he copying them over? Is that even a thing that you can do with a mutation? Lots of questions about that. And by the way, really looking forward to reading you guys' comments about this. But they have their big clash, and then the final jump, which was not something I was expecting, although it does excite me for the possibilities for next season, obviously, because I'm loving Jermaine Clement playing Oliver here. The final jump is Shadow King gets into Oliver, and Oliver just waltzes out, gets in his car, and drives off. Again, very, very excited for Jermaine Clement to be prominently featured in the next season, I hope. But it felt just sort of out of nowhere to me. There wasn't that was not the next logical step. Okay, the next logical step was Carrie and Kerry fused together. That's the next logical step in this weird chain of Shadow King jumping from person to person and powers melding, right? We've set all these things up that make the dominoes fall the way there should have fallen. So this is my problem. Again, I said I was split in half, and I really am, because I loved the scene where Sid kissed David so much. Again, tickled my heart, made me happy. Just roses and puppies and, a spring day is what that scene was to me. But then you have kind of a letdown ending. All right, the mid-credit scene that they did is so far out of left field, where David gets sucked into a ball. I wrote down ball. I wrote down in my notes, post-credits, David gets sucked up by floating ball. My wife read that. She said, do you want to say orb? No, I didn't want to say orb. I wanted to say ball, because this is Ball Z, and maybe wrong. Maybe a little bit not what we want. Not really what I wanted anyway. It feels like Noah Hawley doing stuff because he knows he can get away with it, which is a little bit... I'm glad that he has the creative freedom here. All right, that's cool. I'm not super proud of what he's done with it here, because it's... The show, the ending here is not super satisfying. There's all this weird... Like, I didn't need it to be my twist, but it seemed like that it was building up to some kind of reveal about the nature of David and his powers, and it was a complete non-reveal. It was just David and the Shadow King and the other mutants and Division 3, essentially like we've seen them all season, and then, oh, by the way, here's some wacky stuff at the end. However, as I mentioned, the strengths of this episode, the relationships that were brought to the fore, the dramatic stuff between Melanie and Oliver, right? The stuff that could have used a little bit more, but, setting up things between Kerry and Kerry, and then ultimately between Sid and David, felt really, really satisfying to me. So I'm leaving the show on a kind of meh, just because there was some stuff here that I despised, and there was some stuff that I adored with every fiber of my being, and it's a weird note to leave off on. I really am looking forward to what you guys thought of it, especially that end credits scene. Like, Oliver leaving isn't the worst thing. Oliver going off with Aubrey Plaza. Hopefully she'll be, both these guys will continue to be main characters in the next season. Looking forward to that. It didn't feel like the end of this story, though. It just felt like another to be continued. And I wanted more, like, nailed down. This is the end of this arc. Now we have another arc. I realize that it's a different dynamic, but it still feels like, oh, well, we're going to spend the next season fighting the Shadow King. They do... I mean, there is the truce between David and Division 3 and the idea that now they have to go fight the Shadow King together. That's cool. But it's not the closure that I wanted in this final episode. Again, love to hear what you guys think. Please leave a comment if you disagree with something that I've said, or if you have further information or thoughts or things that I've missed. The best part about doing these 8 episodes recaps has been interacting with you guys, even when you disagree with me. I know a lot of people last episode were very unhappy that I was unhappy with the episode, and I get that. I know that if you're looking at a recap, you think, well, why I like the show. Why didn't this guy like the show? I like the show. I'm still a fan. It's definitely the weirdest thing on television that I've seen, and I'm a big fan of weird. But I think that'll just about do it for everything I have to say for this episode. Thanks everybody again for watching all 8 of these episodes, all these recaps. If you've been following through, I really appreciate that. I will be, when Better Call Saul comes on, I will be recapping those shows because very different dynamic, but I really do enjoy those stories, and Vince Gilligan is just a really incredible storyteller, so I'll be talking about that. If you've enjoyed me at all and you want to follow me over there, look on this channel for that kind of stuff coming up. Again, love to hear what you guys think. Leave a comment. I'll be back almost certainly for next season, if there is a next season. There is a next season. There's definitely a next season. They've renewed it, so I'll be back to talk about it when that happens. But until then, for the Human Echoes recap, I'm Albert. Take care, everybody.